This is something that I found very interesting throughout the week. So from a betting perspective, if any of you guys follow me for the betting content, from a betting perspective, there is some pretty interesting trends in terms of making money on Conference Championship Sunday, okay? So when it comes to this weekend in particular, straight up winners this weekend for the AFC and NFC Championship are also 38-2. 38-2 against the spread. Okay? So pick the winner of this week and essentially you will cover. Okay? In the last 7 years, the home team is 11-3 in this spot. Okay? So it heavily helps home teams in the AFC and NFC Championship game. Over the last 15 AFC Championship games, the home team is 13-2. So especially in the AFC, it helps to have the home field. Not saying it's impossible for the road team to win, but it's highly likely that the home team will win. In fact, the Chiefs have played, this will be their 4th consecutive AFC Championship game. They have played 3 AFC Championship games, all at home, right? They played the Patriots, the Titans, and then the Bills, and now they're playing the Bengals, right? They lost one of those games. So they're 2-1. They're one of the teams that actually lost in this spot. They lost the Patriots. But I wouldn't say that the Titans, the Bills, or the Bengals were on the Tom Brady Patriot level. Okay? Just to say that much. But, yeah, that's very interesting. That if you want to pick a winner this week, if you are betting this week, just pick who you think's going to win the game. And most likely, you will make money this weekend. So just keep that in mind. Okay? So, let's start with the AFC Championship. This is the first AFC Championship appearance for the Bengals since 1988, which was 8 years before I was born. Long time ago. And I believe the Bengals in that game advanced to play Joe Montana. So that's how long ago it's been. That's how long it's been for the Bengals to be in this game. Not just to win the game, but to be in the game. 1988, okay? And this is the 4th straight appearance for the Chiefs. You know what's crazy? I was thinking about this too. It's crazy. Like, it is a heck of a feat to go 4 straight AFC Championship games. That's extremely impressive. I was thinking about it earlier today. I'm like, bro, my Patriots went to 10 straight AFC Championship games. From 2011 to 20, or not 10 straight, but like 8 straight or 9 straight. From 2011 to 2018. That's insane. Can the Chiefs do that? We'll find out. They're halfway. So they're halfway there. That's pretty incredible that what the Patriots were doing looking back at it. But the Chiefs are that team that are trying to do their own Patriot impression and get there. Another point I have about this game that I think is interesting from a psychological perspective is the Chiefs in terms of beating the Bills, right? So the Chiefs beat the Bills last week. And everybody was talking about that game as if it was the AFC Championship. And I don't know if you've ever played sports before, but those of you that have played, let's say in, I don't know, like anything really where you're in some sort of tournament setting, playoff setting, right? And you have to go against a team that you think is really difficult the round before you actually ultimately have to win the whole thing or advance in the playoffs, right? So let's just say you play a team that usually gives you a really tough time in the second round, but you realize that you still have 2 more rounds to go, kind of like the Chiefs. Sometimes when you beat a team early in the playoffs that you find or that is being billed as a more difficult matchup, it's sometimes psychologically the team that comes from that victory can come out a little bit slow. And that's something I'll be watching in this game. Now, I think the interesting thing about this is this would be a bigger factor to me if the Chiefs beat the Bengals earlier in the year. To say like, okay, Kansas City already beat the Bengals earlier this year. They're clearly the better team. They're clearly going to walk all over Cincinnati. But at least Kansas City's had that where they lost to the Bengals. So there is that revenge factor coming into this game. Because I think there would be a lot psychologically to say, like, the Bengals aren't as good as the Bills in many people's minds. So we should easily walk into this game and win, right? So I feel like, just from a psychological perspective, I'm intrigued to watch how Kansas City comes out to start this game. Because that could give the Bengals the edge they need to potentially pull off the upset here, is if they start faster and they come out with that psychological edge of the underdog that nobody believes we're going to win this game. Because quite frankly, the spread is 7 points. Not a lot of people, in an AFC Championship game, it's rare that we see a spread this large. And not a lot of people actually believe that Cincinnati is going to beat Kansas City. So that is a factor to me just from a psychological perspective. Now, from injuries perspective, we have Tyrann Mathieu, who did not practice Wednesday with a concussion. I would say this about Tyrann Mathieu. He is essential to this team. If the Chiefs are going to win this game, they need Tyrann Mathieu in the lineup. They need Tyrann Mathieu because they're playing Joe Burrow and a receiving core that is absolutely big play, oriented, and explosive. And without that free safety and also nickel defender and hybrid defender and leader and communicator that Tyrann Mathieu is, without him to potentially take on CJ Uzomah in some matchups and then also cover deep on top of Jamar Chase in certain plays, that is going to be a massive loss. And the reason I say that is not just because of how good Tyrann Mathieu is from a mental and physical standpoint, but also because he is a lot better than the guy replacing him. If Daniel Sorensen becomes a primary asset and a primary player for this Chiefs defense, we've seen how much worse this defense gets when Daniel Sorensen is on the field. We even saw it versus the Bills last week, and Daniel Sorensen had some really bad plays in the Bengals game the first time they played. So I'll say that Tyrann Mathieu is huge for this game. If he doesn't play, the Bengals, to me, have a very realistic chance of winning this game. I'll say that it is a concussion. I would assume that he plays, but he needs to be able to practice by Friday. If he doesn't practice by Friday, it's going to be tough. Then maybe he's cleared on Saturday. So that's something to definitely watch. In terms of the Bengals, we know that Larry Ogunjobi is out for the season, so he won't be playing. He was the lone player that I look at the first game and say, okay, he was playing, he's not playing now. Cam Sample, the defensive end, backup rotation player, did not practice today. Everyone else is seemingly healthy on both sides, so I feel like we're going to get a pretty close lineup that we got from Week 17 on both sides, because both teams were pretty healthy on both sides of the ball in the first game, okay? So the last time they played, it was 34-31 Cincinnati. This game was in Cincinnati, the jungle. One of the games where I thought they were very loud. It was clearly a very big game for the Bengals, and they won the division by winning this game. Week 17, okay? Looking back at both quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes had a good game, but not a great game. 259 yards, 2 touchdowns, 113.9. Pretty average Mahomes performance considering his standards. Joe Burrow, on the other hand, had an epic performance. 446 yards, 4 touchdowns, and over a 148 passer rating. So he was lights out and he was phenomenal. I did this game. If you want to go back and just for fun, maybe you're a Bengals or a Chiefs fan, go back and watch my live stream reactions to that game, and you can maybe get a sense of how the second game might go just based on my thoughts throughout the game. Jamar Chase, you might remember, set a single game NFL rookie record with 266 receiving yards. He's probably not going to be able to replicate that this time around, but it just so shows that Ja'Marr Chase is a problem for this secondary, and nobody in the Chiefs secondary can cover him one-on-one. Not many players in the NFL can cover him one-on-one. Something that I found interesting from the box score. The Chiefs found 10 different receivers in this game the first time around. So 10 different receivers received a pass from Patrick Mahomes in the first game, which is sort of rare. I feel like it's mostly Kelsey and Hill and then a sprinkle of everybody else. But the first game was actually pretty spread the wealth around. Chris Jones had 2 sacks in the first game. He is the primary pass rusher for the Chiefs that you got to worry about. The Chiefs sacked Joe Burrow a total of 4 times in the game, and I thought that was interesting coming off of a game where he was sacked 9 times by Tennessee. I wanted to look back at that stat in particular. Joe Mixon caught 7 catches, 7 passes in the game, which is a high total, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Bengals were chasing for a majority of the game, because the game was 28-17 Kansas City at the half. So something that people forget about that game is Kansas City was in control. Kansas City looked like the team that was going to win the game, and they looked like the superior team, 28-17 at the half on the road. And then it spiraled from there. Something I will say about this game is the Bengals ended up winning it, right? 34-31 or whatever it was. But Mahomes wasn't picked off in the game despite throwing multiple turnover-worthy plays where he should have been picked off multiple times in the game. Go back, watch the game for yourself. He should have thrown 2 or 3 interceptions that were dropped or that just didn't result in an interception, okay? So it went from 28-17 to 31-28 for the Bengals with 11:41 left in the game. So, Kansas City actually only ended up scoring 3 points in the second half of the game. And it was 31-31, which that is where the game became very fascinating. It went to a 3rd and 27 for the Bengals. 3rd and 27, and the Bengals convert a 3rd and 27. Spagnuolo sends an all-out pressure. Burrow hits a sideline, down the right sideline, fade to Ja'Marr Chase for the conversion. So that was the big game-changing play that won the Bengals the game. There were a lot of flags in this game for both sides, really, especially at the end of the game in favor of the Bengals. It will be interesting to see how the refs call this game, because going back and watching it, there were a lot of holding calls. But a lot of the holding calls were very deserved. Like, it was very deserving that Cincinnati got those first downs, because the Chiefs couldn't cover the Bengals, and that was blatantly obvious from anybody that watched the game. So it will be interesting to see if the Chiefs, the amount of man coverage that they play, can get away with more holding in this game than they did in the regular season, because it is the playoffs and typically teams do get away with stuff like that more often. And another interesting stat that I found was that Cincinnati was only 2 for 7 on 3rd down entering the 4th quarter when the Bengals were only down by 4 points. So figuring that, you know, the Bengals didn't really have a lot of success on 3rd down. And despite that, they were still moving the ball and still made it a very entertaining game, which usually a team like the Bengals, for them to beat a superior roster in the Chiefs, you usually have to be like really fortunate or just really good on 3rd down. And that wasn't really the case for the Bengals until the very end of the game. If you guys haven't already, make sure you do Gronk spike that like button, please. Let's try to get those likes up there. Help the algorithm. Help people find this video, please. I would really, really appreciate it. Okay, let's break down both sides of the football. So starting with Cincinnati's offense, or Cincinnati's defense versus Kansas City's offense. So the 2 players that absolutely torched the Buffalo Bills were Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Okay, both of these players went off. Tyreek Hill went absolutely off with 11 catches for 150 yards, a game-changing touchdown. He had a touchdown in the game. Kelce had the game-winning touchdown, had a ton of yards. once again, a great game for both of them versus Buffalo. Interesting enough, in the game versus Cincinnati, they did not play well, to the point where they actually played two of their worst games of the season. And the Chiefs almost won the game. Okay, so you could look at it in one way and say that the Bengals did a really good job of taking away Hill and Kelce. And you could also look at it in an alternative way and say that the Chiefs almost won the game despite those players not having huge games. So looking at the stat sheet, right? In the Week 17 game, Kelce caught 5 of 7 targets for just 25 yards. That was his second lowest total in a game all season, even though he did have a touchdown. Okay? In the Week 17 win, the Bengals held Hill to 6 catches for 40 yards on 10 targets. So Kelce and Hill together only accounted for 65 yards in the first matchup on 17 targets. So largely both players were very inefficient. You can look at that again and say that that will happen again because the Bengals just have the personnel and the scheme to do it. Or you can say that that's certainly not going to happen again. Both of these players will have a better game. And truthfully, I think Cincinnati is a lot more equipped to slow down Tyreek Hill than they are Travis Kelce, because I feel like the free safety of Jesse Bates with his speed and the range that he has does a great job of taking away the deep ball for opposing offenses. So I think that the Bengals are a lot more equipped at slowing down Tyreek Hill, but I'm not so sure that they'll once again be able to slow down Travis Kelce. I could be wrong, but we will see, okay? So the key to me is Jesse Bates in the middle of the field, containing the deep part of the field, and taking away Tyreek Hill on those vertical plays. For the Chiefs, you don't want to let Trey Hendrickson beat you. How do you lose this game if you're the Chiefs offense? You don't treat Trey Hendrickson like he's their best pass rusher by far, because he is. So whatever you got to do there, if that means you got to double him, sort of chip him with a back, or find a way to just not allow him to disrupt this game. Because Trey Hendrickson is the guy that consistently gets pressure for the Bengals. And really, he's the only guy on that D-line that I worry about challenging Mahomes and consistently getting pressure on Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs' offensive line has probably been their most underrated asset late in the season. I think they've been phenomenal. I think they were one of the biggest... They were one of the biggest differences between the Bills and the Chiefs. I thought the Chiefs' offensive line did a lot better job at protecting Mahomes than the Bills did protecting Allen. I thought Mahomes was very comfortable in the first Bengals game for a lot of it, and I felt like the Bills couldn't really get pressure on Mahomes either, and when they did, he made enough moves within the pocket to find a throw. So the Chiefs' offensive line just looks really good. It's playing really well. And I think that the Chiefs can wear down this pass rush, a pass rush that's very thin. They don't have a lot of depth. They don't have multiple waves or multiple disruptive pass rushers who can give Mahomes a lot of issues. It's really Trey Hendrickson, and DJ Reader's like a push the pocket type of guy, but he's not a super great pass rusher. He's more of a run defender. Sam Hubbard's okay. He's not fantastic. A BJ Hill is another kind of run defender more than a pass rusher. So they don't really have a ton of depth there either, especially with the kid being on the injured report. Cam Sample, he's also might not even play. So that's another layer of depth that could be missing for Cincinnati. So overall, I look at that D-line, O-line matchup as one that the Bengals can quite often be exposed in from a pass blocking perspective. I think Mahomes is going to have the ability to drop back and find his easy completions over the middle of the field to Travis Kelce. And the other receivers, I would expect the Bengals to heavily focus on taking away Tyreek Hill when he runs down the field, and as much as they can. We'll see what they can do slowing down Travis Kelce once again. They did a good job in the first game, but we'll see in the second game. I think Mahomes, and this is something I said, guys, about the Mahomes performance versus Buffalo. Because a lot of people were saying to me, yo, Mitch, what the F are you talking about? Mahomes wasn't dinking and dunking. He doesn't dink and dunk. He's more than that. He's better than that. And I think people, for some reason, they hear the terms dinking and dunking and they think that's a negative connotation. It's not negative. When you look at the statistics, and I could even try to pull them up for you again. All I was alluding to was the range and the areas of the field that Patrick Mahomes was throwing the ball in. So I have the stats here still for you. So Mahomes had 2.3% of his attempts versus Buffalo that were deep, which means past 10 air yards, okay? That's the lowest rate of his career. So factually, Patrick Mahomes threw the ball short in the game. Does that mean he's overrated? No. It actually means he's become a better player. What I mean by that is he has become a more patient player. He has become more equipped to hang in the pocket, read a defense, decipher a coverage, and throw the ball in the right place. Young Patrick Mahomes would just run around and throw the ball to the open guy post-snap. Patrick Mahomes even admitted that he didn't do a good job of reading defenses. He would read a defense after the snap and not pre-snap. Mahomes is doing a better job now of taking what is there on a play, which is where the Chiefs have become much better as an offense. They have become much better throwing the ball underneath, creating yards after catch, being efficient on early downs, setting themselves up for no third down or manageable third downs, and that shows in the performance versus the Bills, where 75% of his throws were between 1 and 10 air yards, which was the highest of his career. So, just pointing that out once again for the multiple Chiefs fans who commented on my video saying that I'm an idiot because Mahomes is better than dinking and dunking. Dinking and dunking does not mean you're bad. It means you have multiple avenues to attack a defense. If everything is open underneath 5 yards, Tom Brady would throw it every single time. And if Tom Brady would throw it, then it's probably a good play, okay? So that's all I'm trying to throw out there is about that, okay? It's not that he still can't throw the ball down the field. He can. It's just that he has evolved. And that has made him, again, I'll say it again, a better player, okay? Now, continuing this, I think for the Bengals to counter the Chiefs. We know what the Chiefs are going to try to do. They're going to come out. They're going to spread it underneath, throw to their playmakers, try to create yards after catch. And then from there, they're going to mix in the run, right? But they don't really want to run. They're going to mix the run in just a little bit, right? Mix it in. For the Bengals to counteract this, I think they've got to heavily rely on their defensive line to just stop the run themselves. And I thought one of the best players all weekend was DJ Reader. DJ Reader was phenomenal in the Tennessee Titans game. He was a one-man wrecking crew versus Derrick Henry. He was the reason that defense performed the way it did because he plugged up the holes, pushed the pocket, made plays on Derrick Henry, made so the key versus Derrick Henry is you can't let him get to the second, third level because his acceleration and his power are so overwhelming. But Derrick Henry's a guy that takes a long time to build up that speed, right? Because he's so big, it takes him time. It takes him a couple yards to get through the hole to build it up. But if you get the penetration right away with a guy like DJ Reader, you can slow that right down. And DJ Reader and BJ Hill, the two guys inside for the Bengals, are going to have great games. This front four, when the Chiefs decide to run, they've got to put a stop to it. Because if you're the Bengals, you've got to go light personnel. You've got to just take all the passes away as much as possible for you And you've probably got to lean towards more zone coverage, although I feel like the Bengals can mix in the odd man coverage because their cornerbacks, unlike popular belief, are actually fairly good overall. So I feel like they can play decent man coverage in certain moments, but I would say they're going to lean towards the man coverage on the spectrum when they decide to go for their calculated risks. And this is where the Bengals need to push the envelope a little bit more, which I saw them do with the Titans a little bit, which was they used some more blitzes and some more simulated pressures in moments to create a bad Ryan Tannehill. And I think for the Bengals, they've got to do this as much as possible versus Mahomes. They've got to try to attack Mahomes in different ways, but they've got to be calculated with it, right? In the right versus the right formations in the right down and distances, you can take your shots with certain blitzes from certain areas. And I thought Cincinnati, one of the big plays in the game was actually forcing the Chiefs to kick a field goal late in the fourth quarter. They sent a double A-gap blitz. It got to Mahomes, and he had to throw the ball away. So I think the Bengals mixing in the blitz with your four-man rush so there's not so much pressure on Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard to get to Mahomes consistently, because I just don't think they're going to be able to consistently get there with four. So I think you're going to need to try to spin the dial of simulating pressures and blitzing the quarterback, because if you don't and you just rely on the four-man, I think Mahomes is going to be too comfortable. He's going to sit back there. He's going to be able to dice you up. So that's the way I see it personally. From a Kansas City perspective, offensively, again, with their run game, there is opportunity if they stay patient with it. We saw that the Titans eventually in the second half were able to gash the Bengals with Foreman of all running backs in the game. So I do think if Kansas City can properly run the ball in this game, it's going to be game over for the Bengals, because I just don't see how their defense is going to be able to properly defend all that they have to offer in the passing game and in the running game at the same time. So one of the big X factors for this game, believe it or not, is DJ Reader, BJ Hill's ability to stop the run game before it even gets started and to make the Chiefs absolutely one-dimensional so that they can, understand that they're just going to send all these crazy simulated pressures and blitzes and just get to the pass game. Because if the Chiefs can somehow rely on their run game as well, it's just way too difficult to handle this Chiefs offense with all the RPOs, the screens, the passing concepts that they have to offer on top of Mahomes' ability to run and all that other stuff. So it's going to be challenging for the Bengals defense, but I think what we saw in the second half of the first matchup was a defense that at least I don't think will be completely overwhelmed, but where I truly see Kansas City taking advantage is I just don't know if the Bengals are going to have enough with their four-man rush to consistently disrupt Mahomes, and I think Mahomes is going to have too much time to make plays over the middle of the field. I don't think that the Bengals are going to allow him to throw the ball down the field. I think this is going to be another game where Mahomes is going to have to go through his patience and make those plays underneath on the early downs and to consistently move the ball down the field. And the Bengals are going to take their chances when they do make the odd incompletion on first or second to send a blitz when it gets to third down. So that's how I kind of see it going. I do expect more success from Kelsey than the first game, but I would expect a relatively quiet Hill game. I don't think he's going to go absolutely ham like he did versus the Bills, but he'll still probably have a decent game. Now, flipping it to the other side, Cincinnati's offense versus Kansas City's defense. This is truly the fascinating matchup of this game for me. The Chiefs' defense, the last 4 games against non-Big Ben Roethlisberger teams, okay, because I say non-Big Ben teams because Big Ben is dreadful. 30.5 points, 407.5 yards allowed. So the Chiefs, in the last 4 games that did not play the Steelers, have allowed over 30 points and over 400 yards a game. So the Chiefs' defense, for as much as it's improved this season from the beginning of the year to the end, and it has, it's still very susceptible against good offenses, okay? The Bengals, One key stat for them is they are 2-4 when allowing 5+ sacks this season. So if you consistently see the Chiefs getting to Burrow, it's most likely a sign that the Chiefs will win the game. Ingram, Frank Clark, Jarron Reed, Chris Jones. That is what this game will come down to for the Kansas City Chiefs. These 4 men and their ability to disrupt Burrow and Spagnuolo's ability to send just enough in terms of the creativity with the blitz packages, the different looks, the simulated pressures, and disguising coverages in the back end to be able to throw off Joe Burrow, make him hold the ball a click longer, and then get to Joe Burrow. This is something that the Titans did very, very well. We talked about this last week. Tennessee, more than anyone in the NFL, sent more simulated pressure than anyone else. If you don't know what that means, by the way, I've said it a lot already, is essentially showing like you're going to blitz, right? Showing like you're going to send 6 people, but you only really send 4. You only really send 3. You only really send the traditional amount of pass rushers, but it looks like a bunch of people are going to send a blitz, right? So that is what I'm aiming at here. And that is something that the Titans did at a very high level and a very high rate. Tennessee can't play man coverage. They don't play it. They got shredded when they went to it versus the Bengals. Kansas City cannot afford to play man coverage. When you go back and watch the first game, Jamar Chase couldn't be stopped. Not one bit. Buffalo torched Kansas City in man coverage. And the same thing will happen again if Spagnuolo rolls out there and just plays a bunch of man press and expects to win and stop this offense. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They're going to have to go more to a Titans defense, a Titans approach, which if the Chiefs combine the Titans game plan on defense with their offense, they're going to win this game. Like, I have no doubts about it. If they just... And they're not going to have the same sort of success that the Titans did because the Titans have a better pass rush than the Chiefs. But the Chiefs' pass rush isn't bad at all. One of the surprising elements of the game last week was the Chiefs' ability to pass rush on Josh Allen and that offensive line of the Bills. I thought Melvin Ingram had a great game. So I think the Chiefs have capacity to do that. Now, when you're talking about attacking the Bengals offensive line, the biggest weakness for the Bengals offensive line is the right side of the offensive line, specifically the right tackle and the right guard. Chris Jones has lined up on the right side of opposing offensive line 60% of the time this season, so 6 out of 10 times he would line up over there. That's the major weakness of this offensive line. So you'll see Spagnuolo attack the right side consistently with different pressures, different stunts, and probably putting Chris Jones over there more often than not. The Chiefs run simulated pressure at an average rate. So what I want to see from them in this game is just ticking that up a few percentages up and playing man less. I think if you play man, you got to play 2-man. You got to play man under 2 deep, right? 2 deep zones with your safeties and man underneath. That's the only way that you can play man against this team because you don't want Burrow throwing fades for 50 yards to Jamar Chase. You just don't want that to happen. That's how you'll lose the game. I expect to see probably more like cover 2 in terms of Tampa 2 zone defense. You know, maybe mixing in a little bit more cover 3 than they typically play over there in Kansas City, but things like that, okay? Other players other than Chase for the Bengals are going to have to perform. So when I look at it, Chase is going to get his. He's going to make his plays. I would expect Charvarius Ward to be the primary cover guy on him, as well as having a lot of safety help for wherever he goes. The one thing I will say about playing more man is that you have the flexibility to help on a receiver more often, right? And this is what I've always enjoyed about the Patriots playing a lot of man, is because when you play man, you can oftentimes double the best receiver because you have man talent elsewhere. So if the Chiefs decide to go to more man like they usually do, then that means that let's say they always double Chase, right? Well, that means that Higgins and Boyd are going to have to win their matchups, and they're going to have to come up big, and they're going to have to do their Gabe Davis impressions. Can T. Higgins be the Gabe Davis for this game? That's the question to me. T. Higgins had a good game last week, 7 catches for 96 yards. And I think he could easily be the Gabe Davis of this week. You know, but that might be a win for the Chiefs. If the Chiefs are able to force Burrow to throw to Higgins more times than he throws to Chase, that might be a W. Can Mixon get it going on the ground? Can Mixon control the clock as a runner? Can Mixon convert the third downs? Can Mixon make it so that the Chiefs are scared of the Bengals just running the ball the whole game and eating the clock? Can the Bengals consistently run the ball on the Chiefs? Because if you're able to run the ball versus the 2 deep looks, you're going to force the Chiefs to come down into the box and respect Joe Mixon and the running game. So that is also an element that could be a huge X factor for this game, which I could see the Bengals having a little bit of success in that regard, but I wouldn't expect that to take over the game so much so that Spagnuolo has to change his whole game plan. And one thing that I was really disappointed in with the Bengals last week that I want to see more of this week is the underneath passing of the Bengals needs to be much greater. Because you know the Chiefs are not going to allow you to just attack down the field with Chase again in this game. So taking what's there and getting those easy yards on early downs is going to be essential for the Bengals to avoid the 3rd and longs where Chris Jones, it's 3rd and 10, Chris Jones coming for Joe Burrow and he's going to sack him like Jeffrey Simmons did. That's not going to be a good recipe for Joe Burrow, okay? So early downs and developing that short passing attack for Cincinnati is absolutely crucial for them winning this game. Now, something interesting statistically, lastly, with this matchup on offense for the Bengals is that if Burrow does face 2 safety shells, he could turn to a lot of intermediate passes where he's been very good this season. He's been the best in the NFL in every metric on passes from 10 to 19 air yards since week 7, including a passer rating of 154.4. Burrow could continue to feed Joe Mixon. Over the last 4 games, he has amassed 23 receptions out of the backfield, including 189 yards. So, Mixon in the passing game, Mixon in the run game, a little bit of CJ Uzoma, and a lot of intermediate short passes for the Bengals to pick up some yak and get the ball quick to their playmakers and avoid what happened last week. If the Bengals fall into a game where they played like they did versus the Titans, where they're trying to go for home runs, the Chiefs are going to win because eventually they're going to get a stop and eventually Mahomes is going to run up the score to the point where it's not going to be able for you to win the game. So the Bengals' only hope is winning a shootout, really. Their defense could make a couple stops and they've got to catch the ball when it hits their hands this time because they dropped 2 interceptions in the first game. But ultimately, I just think the Chiefs are the better team. I view the Bengals as one of those like Andrew Luck Colts teams. I said this in my NFL review show. I think they're over their head at this point. They're a little bit outmatched at this point. And again, guys, this is somebody that's picked against the Bengals multiple times already. So I could be dead wrong. And truthfully, I want Cincinnati to win the game. There is no doubt. They're an incredible story. I just don't view them as being good enough, okay? I don't view them as being good enough. I don't view them as having a good enough overall roster, especially on the offensive line and defensive line. If they had a better 4-man rush, if they were better at protecting Joe Burrow, they could realistically beat this team. But I just don't think that their pass rush is going to consistently get enough pressure, and I don't think they're going to consistently be able to protect Joe Burrow well enough for them to pull off the upset again versus Kansas City. So Kansas City should win this game. I'm going to go with something a little bit closer. I think a lot of people are picking a blowout. I want to see something entertaining. So I'm going to go with 34-27. And realistically, the way Joe Burrow is playing and his weapons are playing, this game could be really close. And I think that's the way they've played is worthy of that respect. So Kansas City's defense is certainly not very good. Cincinnati can have some success on offense. I just don't think it's going to be to the capacity and the consistency of what Mahomes is going to be able to do in this game. So I will take the Chiefs by a touchdown, 34-27. If I had to side either way on who I would take to cover, I would take the Chiefs because, as I said earlier, if you're picking the winner, you're probably picking the spread guy as well, the spread cover machine, and that is the team that often wins. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this spot as well.